your glass up high. Turn it up next time. Tall boy on the line. Loud breeze, they will laugh. Raise your...
Welcome back to episode 262 of the Tall Boy Radio podcast. And as we always say, who knows where it goes when the beer flows? And first of all, we need to give a special welcome to country number 73, Peru.
Happy days. Happy days.
Peru. They've been perusing through our episode titles. God bless them. After that terrible pun, I'll send you over to Gaz. He'll have a few more.
No, look, country number 73.
Yeah.
Happy days. You know, the finally, Tall Boy Radio is stretching to the northern, southern, eastern and western parts of the world. You wondered where I was going with that?
Yeah, I did.
All over the world with Tall Boy Radio, ladies and gents.
Indeed. We perhaps should do an episode on geography because I think we might need to learn a thing or two about that. But tonight we're talking about something very different. We're joined by a guest. He's been on the episode before talking about something very, very different as it just so happens. And maybe we'll talk a little bit of futsal with him later. Michael, how have you been keeping? Have you had a good Christmas and New Year?
I had an amazing Christmas and New Year. Thank you very much. Lots of time with the family. Exciting, doing some exciting things, and yeah, it was magical. How about yourselves?
Yeah, good. Can't complain.
Yeah. A little bit of the lurgy, touched a bit of the family members sort of over Christmas. So it was lovely in a way because in a way you got the lurgy. It meant that it was relatively low key. Like I say, lots of quality time with the family. Not too much time with the extended family because of lurgy and this, that, and the other. But no, it was lovely. Very, very chill, very nice. Spent a couple of sort of evenings with this old lump here to my right, sort of thing. So all good.
And a lump I am. Yes, indeed. I love the way you qualify that. Saying, yeah, I've had a brilliant Christmas because the in-laws have had to stay away because everybody's been poor.
If everybody's listening, then apologies for any offence caused.
Indeed, but something maybe will be. This episode could be of use for them. Who knows?
Yeah.
So we are looking. I apologise for that if you are listening because I do quite like your in-laws.
I quite like my in-laws as well. If I'm honest. So there we go.
To be clear. So yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about social care, looking at how it affects you, finding out a little bit of knowledge about it. Because it's one of those things I think you put off looking into unless you absolutely have to. When you're faced with it, and you could probably go into that arms with a little bit more knowledge, and that's what we're going to try and do for you tonight. So, Michael, did you want to tell us first a little bit as to why you're talking to us about this topic?
Sure. So, back in 1997, my parents bought a care home, knowing nothing about social care at all, as you could do back then. We're still in the business. 26 years later, we now own 6 care homes, specializing in elderly individuals who live with dementia, although some not that elderly. We actually have a resident who is in her 40s, which is scary. My career sort of went from at the age of 15, 16, actually supporting residents on the floor. So I've done my shifts, I've wiped my bums, I've done what social care is. I went sideways and went into accountancy. I've come back out and I'm now the finance director of the group. My sister is the operations director. My dad runs it. Very much a family values care home group. I'm really passionate about the sector, surprisingly so for a cynical, embittered 42-year-old. And the one thing I can give is my time to help explain what social care is. And I genuinely like doing it because I don't think enough people understand what social care is, its implications for us all. And if I'm talking in accountancy speak, the planning that we all need to make about what if might happen, and you actually do need to access social care in the future.
Yeah, a lot of value. And to be fair, like I say, family values in there. Clearly, family values when you own it with your family like that. Fair play to you, And my brother has a background in care as well, so he's worked in care homes, managed care homes. Doesn't do it anymore. Works for Ofsted now. Still in that sector, looking at those things. So although I don't have a level of knowledge or understanding myself, I have heard some stories that he'll gladly share with me. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing from yourself. So you said that then. Do you want to give us a little bit of information then, that just a starter information is the kind of stuff that we should be considering now? Maybe when we're looking at our parents, or you're lucky enough to still be in your 40s, Gaz and I, although you'd never believe it, or in our 50s. Yeah, the white beard is a bit of a giveaway, but we're in our 50s now, so we're 10 years closer than your good self to having to think about how it would affect us personally.
So, let's start with money, if we can.
Yep.
So, what I think many people mistake social care for is part of the NHS, and the NHS, fantastic organisation, care free at the point of need, is an amazing concept. Should be cherished and supported. The problem is that when we created it in the 1950s, what we sort of did was, right, hospitals over here, carefree at the point of need. If it's an emergency, we'll fix you over here. But everything else, including this weird thing where you start, dementia type thing, which we didn't really know too much about in the 50s, we're going to leave that to one side, and the local authority can deal with that, because it was a community thing, and that seemed an appropriate place to put it. Roll forward into the 1980s, we had privatization under Thatcher, and suddenly care homes could be operated by private individuals. And the sector hasn't evolved since then. We're still fundamentally under the same framework, which means that the modern society that we live in today, very fragmented, families not supporting each other locally, we're all geographically diverse. That society does not fit into the way that social care was designed in the 1950s and in the 1980s. And so we have this really fragmented patchwork of care that we're trying to support everybody through. The problem that we have is that it's not free, because the arbitrary cap is £23,500. So if you have more than £23,500 of cash assets in your possession when you go into care, you will pay for your own care. Now, there's all of it. There's an exception there around your house. So if you are living in your house and you are going to receive care in your house, or your partner is going to continue to live in your house after you move out to go into a care home, the home is excluded.
Right.
But fundamentally, if you have your parent living in their house by themselves and they own that house, it's almost certain that will have to be sold in order to pay for care, down to the value of £23,500.
That's depressing, isn't it? That's a depressing thought.
I will take you one further, sir. So there's a lot of sort of analysis goes on in the sector around what the fair cost of care is. What does it actually cost to look after someone and generate a return that allows us to continue to reinvest in our business? Now, this is not a question of, the fat cats are trying to make loads of money. Genuinely, we're not. We make about somewhere between a 3 and 5% net cash margin. So if our revenue is £100, we make between £3 and £5 cash profit at the end of every year, which we can then reinvest in growing our business. That fair cost of care is about £1,300 to £1,500 a week.
Yeah.
To turn that into a yearly sum, £75,000 a year. Now, there are very few businesses that say, please spend the cost of a Porsche to look after your mum.
Yeah.
Every year. And that is the cost of social care. And it's only increasing because between 60 and 80% of our cost base is staff wages. And if the national living wage goes up £1 and national insurance, and that's a big thing at the moment with the last budget, that's going to increase our cost base. So the cost of care just keeps increasing year on year on year.
Wow. I mean,
yeah, and in a way, I sort of knew that, not necessarily to the extent that you've just highlighted, but you have friends, acquaintances that talk about sort of parents going into care and the cost of looking after them per se, and then you hear sort of various stories about, well, we've had to sell our home, and you have to put your home up as whether it's collateral or equity, whatever the phrase is, to offset the cost of the support that your mum, your dad, whoever it may be, is getting, and you sort of part of you sort of thinks, well, that can't be right.
Yeah.
So then you think, well, okay, so you backtrack a bit. You think, well, if we don't put them in care, then they'll have to stay at home.
Yep.
We'll just look after them at home, and we'll do it. And then you think, but if I'm doing that, then I actually can't work because I can't look after them. I can't work at the same time.
Yep.
So then you start thinking, well, we'll get some private care in. Well, that's expensive as well. And all of a sudden you weigh up all these things and you're like, well, actually, you're a bit damned if you do and a bit damned if you don't in the nicest sort of way. But to take your point there, Michael, you have to be thinking about these things because it is something that I suspect that at some point you are going to have to face.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the truth of it. You are.
Yeah. And we don't have this conversation with our parents. So
No.
understanding what your parents' wishes are and should they require care. A number of my friends in their 40s whose parents are now in their 70s, yeah, we don't know what their wishes are. Do you want to go into a care home? What happens if you get dementia and you can't remember what you want?
Yeah.
And many people don't have powers of attorney set up, which if anyone is listening and has got a parent in their 70s, please talk to them about a power of attorney. Please put one in place, and please make sure it's both for finances and health and well-being, which are two separate requirements. The amount of stress and personal grief that is caused by not having that in place is amazing. The number of people who we encounter who say, I don't have health and well-being power of attorney for my parent, therefore I have no choice at all over what care decisions are being made about them. They can't influence it because they're not legally allowed to.
Yeah.
It's
So-
heartbreaking.
Yeah, so say for example, there you spoke about a lot of the residents in the care homes that you have
Mhm.
there, and one of them tragically young to be affected by dementia. I
Mhm.
can't even imagine what that would be like. So those folks that are affected by dementia, what happens there if the power of attorney isn't set up?
So the short answer is that the council takes over, and they will have a social worker appointed. You go down what is known as court of protection routes, and so the court of protection, so a government body, will take responsibility, and ultimately that responsibility is then deferred on to the local authority and the social worker, and they can make decisions, which is made in conjunction with the care home and the GP and other people acting in the best interests of the resident. The family member has a voice, but they can't decide. And that's what the power of attorney does. They actually act on behalf of the individual to make their informed decisions. They can choose to represent that individual.
And
So-
is there a point of appeal for that? So that's the wrong phrase, I suppose.
No.
But if I don't know, let's use me. I mean, I'm in a relatively fortunate position. My mum died a number of years ago. My dad hasn't got dementia yet, but let's say me. If my dad got dementia and I hadn't got power of attorney, and then all of a sudden down the line I started to disagree with some of the decisions that were being made on behalf of my dad because I haven't got power of attorney, how much scope for appeal do I have to then try and get power of attorney? And I know that's very difficult because my dad at that point perhaps would have dementia and so on and so on. But how do you go about that? How do you go about appeal?
So the interesting thing about power of attorney is it can only be appointed when you have the capacity to appoint that individual. So if you have dementia, you do not have capacity to appoint someone. So therefore, you can't appoint someone. So you have to go down the court. You have to apply to the court of protection to be that power of attorney. The direct answer to your question is, how much power of appeal do you have if you don't have power of attorney? Absolutely none. Zero.
Right. Really? Okay.
Wow. So
yeah,
is an important conversation.
And that's a very and I suppose that in a way, indirectly, that's what I'm sort of trying to get at is if you haven't got it now, actually, it probably is a really, really important question that you start having in a conversation that you do start to have, because down the line, if worst case scenario happens as such, is it the same and sorry, Michael, and you might know this in terms of the mental capacity. So
Mhm.
you would have associated conditions with dementia. It obviously clearly isn't just dementia, but you would have, and I don't know this, and excuse my ignorance, but something like
Yeah.
Parkinson's or something like that potentially could affect your mental capacity, but it isn't dementia. So
Yeah.
would it be like an umbrella?
So,
So
so,
num
capacity is variable, and you can
right,
have the capacity to do certain things or make certain decisions and not have capacity around certain other things.
right,
One of the, just riffing on your point about Parkinson's, one of the fascinating features of social care today compared to the 1950s and 60s is, of course, that people are now living longer with more complex
yeah,
comorbidities.
yeah,
So Parkinson's, diabetes, and dementia, we have that. In fact, you know, multiple cancers, any slew of diseases and horrible conditions you want to mention, learning difficulties plus dementia. We are now seeing those individuals in social care. So, in answer to your question about capacity, yes, everything does influence it. The majority of people who we see in our care home do not have the capacity to make decisions
right, okay,
about, you know, they can, and this is going to sound harsh, but it is the brutal truth. They can just about decide in the morning what they would like to have for lunch that day, but they
yeah,
will, you can guarantee that they will change their mind.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Wow. I mean, dementia is a big thing. We know that it's talked about now a lot. You hear a lot about it in the media and social media as well. It's not a taboo subject anymore. It's something that, you know, we're aware of. Have we had that conversation? I certainly haven't had that conversation with my mum and dad, you know, and like I say, I'm very fortunate to have, you know, they're both still with us, not together. You know, my dad's somewhere in the Caribbean at the minute. He's doing all right. God bless him. My mum's at home. She dislocated her hip. So if you're watching Nanowiz, which I know you're probably not, but you know, we're thinking of you. I'll pop round. We'll have this conversation Saturday. Something to look forward to. So, in terms of dementia, then, so you know, a lot of the people that you see in care homes are affected by this, and that kind of makes sense. The two will go hand in hand.
Mhm.
What is the understanding now of dementia? I know it's still not good enough, but compared to, like you say, back in the 50s when the NHS was first set up, the understanding was absolutely zero. Is it getting worse, or is our understanding of it getting better?
It's constantly improving. There's some fascinating work being done by a range of neuroscientists. Shout out to Dr. Michelle Veldsman, who is not going to be listening to this, but she does some fascinating work on dementia out of the University of Cambridge. So there was a study last year, as an example, where they analysed the brains of certain individuals who were living with and had actually died with dementia. They found that certain forms of dementia resembled diabetes in terms of the impact on the brain and other organ systems. So there is an element of of dementia, and there are a wide variety of forms of dementia, you know, ranging from Alzheimer's as a type through to vascular and beyond. That actually, but this particular type of dementia actually resembles diabetes, type 3 diabetes, they're calling it. And if you sort of step back and look at what the impact of dementia is, we're starting to see links now. So one of the main things that happens with dementia is that you seem to have a stripping of the myelin sheath in the brain. So the protein sheath around nerves seems to be disintegrating. So that the body is almost stripping away protein for some reason. We're then starting to see in vascular dementia these huge spikes of loss of capacity. So you'll sort of plateau at one level, then you'll have this moment, and then you'll go again. And that's really similar to certain conditions you'll see with the gut and with related to gut issues. And then you've got this diabetes issue. So there's now starting to build a small body of evidence that suggests that actually we should be looking at dementia as actually almost a nutritional based disease rather than something that is purely neurological. So one thing that we've been doing in our care homes is really looking at the protein levels that we're giving to our residents, to the extent that we're now actually giving them protein shakes that you'd be taking if you were going to the gym.
Wow. Okay.
Because not only does that improve their weight, it improves their skin, but our thesis is that actually their bodies may actually be stripping away protein unnecessarily. We have no idea why, but we're just, we're going, well, actually, it's good for their weight, it's good for their skin conditions. There might be some other benefits. Let's look at it.
That's crazy.
So effectively, something that historically would be seen as a neurological condition it is now being potentially considered to be a slightly more of a physiological condition that runs alongside obviously the impact on the brain and stuff. So
we don't understand enough about dementia, and the research is slow. I think that's mostly because it's really difficult to analyze the brain of someone who is gradually deteriorating through a dementia pathway for a range of reasons, but capacity and also at early stages people don't really report it, and it's the early stages that we really want to get to for the research. But being able to say, well, some forms of dementia resemble type 3 diabetes, that's a really powerful statement, and actually makes us as a care home actually really fundamentally look at what we're feeding our residents. Because historically what you do is, well, you're losing weight, and if you have dementia you lose weight. That's just how it is generally. So we're going to fatten you up, we're going to give going to fortify with calories and carbs and sugars. But actually, if there's a link at all to diabetes, we really need to look at that and go, well, actually, what should we be giving you in terms of food? And that's the level of detail that we're now seeing in care, that we need to be thinking so much broader than just we need to keep you warm and dry. We need to be going down to macronutrient levels and saying, okay, what are you actually eating?
Wow. And I'm in a way blown away by that, just because I didn't understand that, as a very naive 51-year-old sort of thing, the impact that it would have actually on your body as well as your mind, and actually what you put in and what you sort of drink and eat and can actually then have a positive impact on potentially the neurological makeup of you. So that I didn't get that, and I didn't understand that.
No,
it's relatively new science, and it's obviously you are what you eat. That's always been known. And I think there's been some fascinating. I've spent a lot of time over the last year looking at the weightlifting community and a lot of the science-based lifting that sort of studies that are coming out there around muscle recovery and protein synthesis. There's some fascinating insights from that actually really apply to what's going on in elderly people. Basically, if you sit down all day, don't move, you're going to see muscle and bone wastage. We know that. We see that in fitness studies. Well, that's what old people do. If they're not socially engaged, if they're not up and moving, if they're in their house, they get up at 8, they turn on the TV, they sit on the sofa, they have a cup of tea, they have a biscuit, they don't go out, they're socially isolated, you're going to see this muscle wastage. And so along with that muscle wastage, we'll have other neurological impacts, but you'll also have social exclusion leading to loneliness, leading to anxiety, leading to depression, stress, and other mental conditions. So there's multiple pathways on this, which I think is also confusing the science, because we're not sure what causes dementia, really. And I think there's a lot of people who live with all these mental conditions because they're socially isolated, and that then maybe exacerbates dementia, which is such a catch-all term for a mental illness. Not only, they also may be living with other illnesses as well and other disease.
Just a question, and I've in a way I've just thought about that. We're talking about capacity and mental capacity to make a decision as such, in terms of going back to power of attorney, but it might not be that. It could be, and I suppose in a way I'm thinking about more the lines of perhaps like euthanasia and that sort of stuff, in terms of the mental capacity to make a decision that's fundamentally, and people talk about these lucid moments, and actually they get periods of time where they are very lucid, and there's periods of time when they're not. So if there was somebody with dementia and you went through a period, and I know dementia is not reversible, but do you get periods where maybe if you're putting the right stuff in and you're feeding them the right diet and nutrition and everything else, and do you get periods of I don't even know whether this is like lucidity, if that's even a word,
It is.
where you can almost have capacity, and then almost like whether it's a day or a week later or an hour later or 2 minutes later, you don't. And I suppose I'm really curious about, how do you know that? How do you know that they're in a period of being lucid and being able to function and make a decision? And then how do you know when they're not, if that's the right sort of question to ask?
So, okay, so I'll answer this in probably 3 ways. The short answer is that periods of lucidity for the individuals who we care for in our care homes are relatively short, and we're talking minutes, hours.
Yeah.
The reason for that is that care homes have now, in order to basically secure the appropriate level of funding, we've had to position our business at the higher levels of care.
Mm-hmm.
So what is happening is that people are in a receiving care in their own home or another facility or whatever. There is a moment of crisis. Care home can't cope. Individual falls over, whatever.
Yeah.
They then go to the NHS and they often get discharged to us. That's the pathway.
Right. Oh, okay.
And so these individuals have very complex dementia and other behavioral conditions. They will so they are very rarely lucid. And if they are lucid, it is it's a memory state rather than present in the here and now, able to make a decision about the here and now.
Yeah.
Also, second part to the answer is that capacity is generally seen by professionals as something you either have or you don't have. And once you don't have capacity, it's almost impossible to demonstrate that you've got it back.
Right.
Particularly with the diagnosis of dementia. Once you have that diagnosis, it is deemed that you don't have capacity.
Really, so really at that initial almost diagnosis phase, so as soon as you get diagnosed, so you might only have effective, and I won't say early onset dementia, but effectively early onset dementia. So even at that stage, they're saying as soon as you have that, you have lost capacity.
You are losing capacity, yes. I think the problem with dementia is that there are essentially 2 gradients. You've got this this step change one, or you've got a straight line.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to tell at early onset stage which variant you have.
Right.
And to be entirely fair, it's really hard to know until you're in a care facility and people with experience and professionalism are able to go, well, actually, it's probably vascular, or it's probably this Alzheimer's straight line curve. So early onset dementia, you probably have some capacity, and it's. I remember way back when in the 1990s when we started in care, we had residents who would lose their glasses, and they're on the top of their head, or they couldn't quite care for themselves at home, and they needed a bit of support getting washing and dressing, and maybe they were incontinent or they had a lack of mobility. The residents we're seeing now are all of that, plus some more when they enter our care homes. And that's the change level. So I can't talk to early onset too much, because where care homes are at right now is much more complex than that.
Right.
Certainly in our area of expertise.
Which then begs the question, I suppose, in a way, is, and following your logic really, is, I suppose, okay, so at what point then, and I don't even know whether there is a point where you definitively lose capacity, because you've got early onset dementia, then it becomes very difficult then to gauge whether you have capacity or not. And at what point do you have dementia and therefore lose capacity? And at what point have you sort of got dementia, which means you've sort of got capacity? And is that a very grey area? And I suppose, is that then very difficult to navigate, I suppose?
Yes, and it's made even more complicated by the fact that individuals tend to try and fake their way through it, is the nicest possible way of putting it.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm fine. I didn't forget your name, son. I just had a funny 5 minutes. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Repeat the same story I've just told you 3 times.
Yes.
Oh no,
Yeah.
everything's fine. Don't worry. It's so we try and pretend that everything's okay, even though we know that something is wrong.
Yeah.
And
But
so
I think that
it's
maybe is a default, isn't it? You know, we always do that as a, I
Yeah.
suppose, you know, so oh no, everything's fine. Well,
Yeah.
it isn't really, is it? So
yeah, and that's why having the conversations with your parents about this is so important. You know, sharing the what ifs and no one likes talking about death, and no one likes talking about what's going to happen at the end. That's why selling life insurance and pensions is incredibly difficult. But by the one emotion, well, probably two emotions that that the people who are placing in care feel. One is guilt. I can't look after my parent anymore. But the second is this unmitigated stress of I've got a moment of crisis and I simply have to put my parent in care, and I have no idea what I'm doing, and I have no idea what their wishes are, and I wish I'd had this conversation earlier.
Wow. Yeah. So I guess that's what how we started off this episode is, we're doubling down on that and saying, how important it is. And hopefully we're giving people an understanding of that. So in terms of emotions, then, you'll have seen it. You'll have dealt with it a number of times. What is it like? What are you seeing? First of all, from the people who are having to make that decision with their parents and make that choice to put them into, into care, into a system where they're looked after by someone, other than a family member who loves and cares for them naturally. And what kind of emotions are, first of all, how are they dealing with it, and how are the people who are having to make that choice dealing with it? The two, the patient and the child of the patient.
So what is fascinating to me about social care, particularly care homes, is that the customer, the person who buys the product, is the child, and the parent is I don't know, maybe the product. That's awful, but
yeah,
they're not actually involved in the buying decision. Very rarely are. There are times when the child will go around and will look at care homes and will make an informed choice, and then bring their parent along and say, "This is the care home I think is best for you. What do you think?" And I'll tell you what we know. I'll tell you how we now know how people search for care. So we have endless marketing data. What people are doing is they're at work in the afternoon. They go to a website, carehome.co.uk, and they search for care homes.
Yeah.
They go home on their personal devices. They'll do research, and the next day they'll put telephone calls in to arrange viewings. Okay, it is 24 hours level of search, and then to arrange that. Viewings typically happen within a week. So they are feeling stressed, and they're working against this incredible need to find something that is suitable for their loved one, for the person who used to care for them. And there's a really fascinating balance there. My mum or dad used to care for me. Now I've got to care for them. I've been trying to do my best with buying care in or supporting myself and being an unpaid carer. Amazing people, by the way. Don't know how people do that. And now they're feeling this guilt of, I can't cope anymore. You've got to go into a care home.
Yeah.
And I think I remember I was walking into one of our care homes not that long ago, a couple of months ago, and it was early, about 3:00, early in the evening, and a family member left. The door was shut. I found out later that she'd just dropped her mum off. And I saw her go through happiness, regret, sadness, elation in about 3 footsteps. Every single emotion. And we ended up just sort of holding hands on the car park as she just wept uncontrollably with all of these emotions. And that's okay. That's completely okay to go through with all of that. In answer about what, the people that we care for, what are they like? For those who have some capacity and understand that they're going into a care home, and they don't like it because they know that this is where they're going to die. This is their final home, and there is a finality to that most people don't enjoy, if not can't accept. So we see every emotion. We see anger, we see rejection, we see, well, it is fundamentally that grief cycle.
Yeah.
Eventually they come to acceptance. those who do not have capacity and don't quite understand where they are, it's a bit weirder, that journey. I'm at a hotel. This is my house. We have one lovely lady who thinks she's the queen and that we are all living in her palace and that we're all servants and otherwise we should get out. So yeah, we have some interesting cases to respond to there.
Yeah, and you know, you look at the family, the children as such that have to put their parents into care.
Yeah,
you know, I suppose there's an element of guilt in terms of having to put the parents into care, but there's also, I suppose, an element of guilt, and this is a horrible phrase, and please don't think I mean it, almost that, not that I'm now free, but I've had to care for this person for so long, after for so many months or years, and it's got to the point now that I actually can't, and I'm going to put them into the home. And as I say, I don't mean it in this way, but it's like a sense of freedom, as much as I actually don't need to care for them now because they're in a home. And then that creates its own guilt, I suppose, in a way. So you feel guilty for you feeling not happy. That I can't think of the emotion that I'm trying to think of, but you put them in the home, and there's almost like a relief, I suppose, that they are getting the care that they probably deserve, and the fact that it's you that doesn't have to do that. And I'm coming across as really callous, and I don't mean in that way, and I can't think of the words.
No, you're not at all. That's a very real emotion. And so for individuals who've been caring for their parents for multiple years, these are individuals who often now have quite complex health conditions, if not dementia. And your life has now revolved around resourcing this. And then you've just had probably what is quite a stressful month or so of trying to arrange a care home, dealing, finding it and everything else. Plus also you've probably had some engagement with the local authority. That's a nightmare at the best of times. You've got GPs, you've got probably district nurses have been involved in coming into your parents' house. That has been a really full-on period. And it is, it's something that, I think people who have just had a child, and so that initial 2, 3 year, 4 year period until they go to preschool or whatever, will go, oh yeah, it's that. And it is probably that emotion of, oh, thank God you're at school, I can go away.
I can do my own thing now, or I can go to the shops and I can get some food, and I can do this, I can do that. But with that comes a sense of guilt as well. So there's almost a double down on the guilt.
Yes, absolutely. In many ways, I think the one service that we need to provide more in social care is actually, put it bluntly, counselling the family members and mental health support for them. There's a lot to unpick and go on there. But again, a lot of it, and I'm coming back to this conversation with your parents, a lot of it is because we don't ask our parents what they want to do.
Just a quick question on that. You've come back to asking parents what they want and what you want to do. And people talk about sort of will writing, and you write a will, and you have an executor of the will. And I don't know in terms of the legal standing of this, but obviously the will is only executed when you die. But if you have somebody that's an executor of your will, does that mean that you effectively have the power of attorney? Does that person have the power of attorney? Is that the same thing just until you die, or not? Is that
no? So the executor of a will only applies when you die.
When you die,
The lasting power of attorney is a completely separate legal document.
Right. Okay.
Just on that, having a living will, if you will, or this is what I want to happen at any point in my life, is a really fascinating concept. And I think that it was something that we should, as a society, actually think about a little bit more. We would in social care would call it a care plan. But if you think about it, you get born, you get that little red book that all your kids had, and you then sort of fill that up with your GP visits. But there's no overarching framework there about, well, what do we want for this child in terms of their education, in terms of their future? You get to 18 and you're a grown adult, and you can suddenly make these decisions yourself. And you still keep getting this little red book ticked in and filled in. It's just obviously now online on Spine with GPs and what have you. But again, we don't have this overarching point of, well, what is your goal? What's your ambitions? Where do you want, if you got hit by a bus and had to go into care, what would you want? We don't have that.
Yeah.
And then we get to our 60s, 70s, 80s, and all of a sudden that is really important. And what ends up happening is that the care home says, okay, this is what we think the objectives are for this individual, to be as independent as they possibly can be for as long as they possibly can be, to live as a fuller life as they can, and then to have a great death. And that's an interesting phrase in and of itself. But we passionately believe that the purpose of social care is to see people through to the end. And we believe in being a home for life. We move heaven and earth to try and make sure that our residents stay with us right to the end. And that those final moments are everything that they want it to be.
Yeah.
And we write that up in a care plan. 16 separate documents. Yeah, pretty chunky item. But we don't have that for the rest of our lives, and we certainly don't talk about it in our 60s and 70s. So I would love to see that implemented. We have the technology, actually. The NHS app that we all had in COVID.
Yeah.
Put it on there.
So effectively, what you're saying is the living will say, okay, so if I was to be in a position where I lost capacity, I would want this to happen. If I was to die, I would want this to happen. Well, if you die, that's your will. So effectively, your living will is, okay, so if I'm struck by X, Y, or Z, I might not be dead, so therefore my will doesn't come into play yet. However, I would want this to happen. So if I do lose capacity, or if this happens, yes, I'm still alive, so my will doesn't happen yet. But I want this. And actually, that makes a lot of sense. That does make a lot. And is there a legal statute for that then? Would that stack up in court if that was the case?
So the short answer is, if it was present, it would certainly be taken very seriously into account by a care home.
Right. Okay.
And please bear in mind that our care plans include things like mobility. So how do we support you to be physically mobile? Yeah. It also includes things like activities. So it's things like, what do you like doing? Okay, you used to enjoy going to watch football. Okay, how do we get you to watch football? Do we go down the pub? Do we go get a TV? Do we actually take you to matches? Yeah. It's also things about what food do you like? Do you like curry? Do you like fish and chips? Do you like peas? Or it's things like, how do you like to express your sexuality? That is genuinely one of our care plan sections. Right. Okay. Now, please go and ask your dad to go and write down how he likes to express his sexuality.
Oh, we all know. We all know. We agree.
but that's the level of detail that our care plans go to. So would that stand up in court if a family said, this is a living will, the care home is not acting to that? Yeah, it probably would, actually. Right. What is difficult and challenging, and I only heard this today, and from my dad, CEO of the company, is that he has heard a report that one of the NHS ICBs is now considering do not attempt CPR orders, which is a decision made by the individual with capacity, saying if I go, do not attempt CPR. Yeah. They are considering that those are not legally binding on them.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. So literally DNRs are like, there's no point having DNRs because they're saying that.
Yeah. So there's a hell of a lot of confusion about it. This is literally me hearing it for the first time today. Yeah. I just went, whoa, that's not acceptable. So I need to follow that through and what have you. But so I think a living will is a great thing to have. And I think that social care would follow it very, very closely. I cannot speak for the NHS.
No.
Wow. There you go. And just for the record, guys, you asked the question about enjoying football. Guys have enjoyed watching football since the mid-1980s when Everton had a decent side. But maybe Moses will change all of that.
It's just when you said, Michael, so, if somebody likes watching football and we need to decide how they watch their football, so do you watch it on a big TV? Do you go to the pub? Do you go to the game? All of the above for me. Take your pick. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, absolutely, and as often as possible. So yeah, so in terms of all of that, gee whiz, there's an awful lot to think about, and it needs to start with a conversation, because I don't know the will of my parents, my children don't know the will of me, and and it's a conversation.
Have you got a will?
I've got a will, yeah.
Yeah,
I've got a will, yeah.
So you've got a will,
yeah.
Which don't tear this wrong, but if you cark it, they know what to do.
Yeah,
but what would happen if you?
They're 8 and 5. They don't.
No, you're right. So yeah, whoever the executive of your will is knows what to do.
Yeah.
That's not me, is it?
It might be actually.
Is it?
I can't remember.
But if you don't die, what happens? So if you die, then there's the will and there's the executive, and they can do X, Y, and Z. But if you don't die, but you lose capacity, what happens? And I suppose that's what Michael is saying, is that actually we need to have these discussions about
100%.
actually, if you are still alive, while you still do have capacity, it's those conversations saying, well, I am still alive, and actually in the future I might not have capacity. So while I do have capacity, I would like this to happen. If that, and I suppose in a way what you're saying, Michael, is those are the type of conversations that should be happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only because it would make my life a heck of a lot easier, but I think it would make the transition for people into social care a lot easier. The big decision at the moment is, should I stay at home or should I move into a care home? And there are these moments of crisis that you get where actually it is no longer safe for the individual to live at home. I'm a firm believer that people should stay in their own homes for as long as they can.
Yeah.
But that is probably often in many instances too long. And it's understanding, okay, actually, you know what? This is the point at which we will talk about care homes and move you in.
And is that because the level of support effectively can't be there in your own home, as opposed to the actual, not the emotional or whatever level, but in terms of maybe just the physical nature of the support that you might need? Is that because it's unlikely to be the case in your own home, whereas in a care home you're more likely to be able to meet those needs?
Yeah, I mean, look, people, the biggest risk is falling over.
Yeah,
people fall over in care homes, right? Not everyone. If you go into a care home and you have a high risk of falls, you will fall in the care home.
Yeah.
But you are surrounded by people who are there and trained to support you and can get you back up quickly and safely and call paramedics if needs be.
Yeah.
At home, you don't have that.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, there is some wonderful work that is being done with acoustic monitoring, so you can hear the sound of someone falling with infrared beams, with Alexa. I'm not a huge fan of the American tech companies, but what Amazon Alexa have done with their Alexas to support care is out of this world. That's really good. So there's technology that we can use to support people to live in their own homes for as long as they can and do so independently and safely. But there's a point at which, and you raised it earlier, well, actually, I'm paying X £1,000 a month for them to go and to bring care in. And I've got my own time invested in that. And by the way, the cost of running the house is X. Yeah. And I've got this stress of, well, what happens if mum leaves the oven on, or dad goes out for a walk and doesn't come back or loses his keys?
Yeah.
Versus a different form of community care, which doesn't necessarily have to be a care home.
No.
Wow. I mean, I never even contemplated. I've got a couple of Google Homes, the minis, whatever you call them. We do listen and play music as well. I use mine for asking what the weather's going to be today. But wow, what value that can actually add? You know what I mean? For picking up on something like that, never even entered my mind.
But so my wife has a granddad that's 99.
Good effort.
And he's just taken a tumble. So he lives in he's not a care home. It's like an assisted living. So he lives in his own flat, and there's a number of elderly people, and have like a ward and this, that, and the other. But I suppose, he's amazing physically. I mean, he's like 99, whatever, and he is incredible. He's obviously a little bit more unstable on his feet now, and he will take a tumble. But if he was, obviously, you know, he doesn't necessarily have the immediate sort of care around him because, you know, my in-laws, my wife's mum and dad, they live somewhere else and they're not looking after him in the home. So he hasn't got that immediate support there. But if he was to fall at home, there might not be anybody there. You know, you fall on your hip and all of a sudden you got internal bleeding, and before you know it, like you're in absolute shit creek sort of thing. Whereas in either assisted living or in a care home, you would have professionals around that would then be able to support you, to help you medically, to get the right medical attention that you would need. And I suppose in a way that's the trade-off, that's the offset. You think we don't want to put them in the home, but actually in terms of the 24/7 wraparound support that they would need, it actually might be the best place for them. And that's ultimately the emotional trade-off that you have, isn't it? I really don't want to, and financially I might not want to, but actually in terms of and any life is better than no life. So actually, if we can provide them care to prolong their life, then that's what we want to do.
It's interesting, to be honest with you, because when you pitched this idea to do an episode about it, I'd mentioned it to Gaz. We both said, yeah, really important topic, but neither of us felt 100% comfortable even just thinking about that. And actually, that's the first step we need to make. The second step is that conversation.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to loop back to before maybe we talk a little bit to you about futsal, because we do know you've got a couple of areas of expertise. Yeah. So in terms of the financial implications of this, and we've heard sort of a 3 to 5%, is what you're making on your revenue there. I mean, that's not an awful lot, I think the likes of bloody Bezos and Musk would sniff at that kind of percentage. But what impact is that recent budget, the rise in national insurance, the rise in the cost of living? Don't get me wrong, it's fantastic. There's a lot of people dealing with poverty out there, probably need a little bit more money coming in, and these things will definitely help them. So I'm not going to criticize too heavily that. But what impact's that going to have on you and the cost implications of that?
Okay, so in very broad terms, our wage bill is around about £10.5 million a year,
right,
on a 15 million turnover business.
Wow.
This is the budget. If you take the increase in the national living wage, and we tend to reflect that all the way through. So a care assistant will go up a certain amount. A senior care assistant will go up. Nurses will go up a certain amount. All the other roles. It's pretty much all the way through our wage structure. Plus employers' national insurance. We estimate that will add something in the region of £750,000 a year onto our wage cost.
Bloody hell. Wow.
I am anticipating that a combination of local authority fee increases, they are strapped for cash. Many of them are going to issue what is known as a Section 117 notice, which basically declares them bankrupt.
Yeah.
NHS increases, they have more money, but I don't think it's going to be directed towards social care. And increases to private fees. We're about 50% local authority NHS funded versus 50% private.
Right,
I think we'll probably raise something in the region of 500, maybe £600,000. By the way, that doesn't include any inflation on the rest of our cost base. Just to give you an idea.
So effectively £250,000 a year shortfall based on what you've just said there. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Which we are probably going to have to absorb.
Wow. And I was curious to know whether or not you were independent or you were local authority based. I suppose you've just said you were about 50-50. Is that right?
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
So in terms of your negotiating capacity, then I suppose in a way the independent is that in a way looks after itself because you can negotiate with the individual families or whoever it may be a certain rate. Do you have how many local authorities do you deal with?
So we have 6 care homes. They are spread across a number of different geographies. So we're kind of unusual, as most groups tend to concentrate. So we deal with 5 main local authorities and 3 main NHS ICBs.
Right. Okay. So So are you in a position then where you can individually negotiate with each of those local authorities and ICBs, or
No.
is there a contract that effectively that either you subscribe to that then ties you to that?
Oh, this is a whole different podcast.
Oh, okay.
So
I
so-
apologize because it's
No,
55
no.
minutes in. So
It's fine. Very, very briefly. The short answer is no, we don't. So local authorities will be coming out in the next couple of months with proposed fee increases for domiciliary care, at-home care, and care homes.
right.
Those are largely based on their central budgets. Most local authorities, roughly 60, 70, 80% of their budget is spent on social care, the whole gamut of it, rather than just elder person. So last year, I think we saw fee increases of round about 5%. You'll remember inflation was running at about 10%. So that was fun.
Real terms, you're losing money, and we get that,
pretty much. This year again, we'd expect similarly low increases, probably maybe 3-4% on current fees. Now, you might be thinking there and going, okay, well, 3-4% on £1,500 a week is great. That, surely you can cover some of your costs with that. Unfortunately not. Local authorities have historically paid below the fair cost of care. The reason they can do this is they are a monopsony. So a monopoly is obviously someone who controls the market by being the only seller. These are the only buyer of services. So we have to contract with them. And they basically can control what the fee rate is. So without naming names, some local authorities that we deal with will pay us something in the region of £725 to £795 a week for 24 hours care in a care home.
Which costs much more than that.
I would encourage you to go and work out how much it would cost to stay in a local hotel for 7 nights plus food plus 4 hours of care a day.
Okay, so my next question, as at some point back in my dim and distant past, a business owner and somebody with a very, very rudimentary knowledge of economics.
I don't think the word rudimentary quite covers that, but carry on.
I suppose what I'm trying to get at is there an opportunity for you? And I don't genuinely know whether this is the case. And I want to say it's collective bargaining, and I don't know whether that's the right phrase or not. But is there any way that you can go to each of the individual, either local authorities, and strike an agreement that allows you to charge X amount as a flat fee, as opposed to then having to deal with all of the different changes between the local authority and the ICBs and the NHS? And I don't know if I phrase that the right way.
So, the short answer is no.
Right. Okay.
Part of the problem there is that because social care is so fragmented, there are roughly, the number changes, but it's between 400 and 450,000 people in care home beds in the UK.
Yeah.
That is across probably about 14, maybe 15,000 providers. 10% of those beds are held by 4 providers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So pre-COVID, about 80% of all care homes were owned by groups of 1 or 2 care homes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that has now changed post-COVID. A lot of the smaller single care homes have vanished from the market.
Right.
So we are so fragmented that a collective approach is functionally hard to do.
Right,
We do have care associations, and at a regional level, that you'll have heard of Care England and Professor Martin Green, who talk on. They are one of. There are 3 or 4 national bodies in England who represent care homes. Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, by the way, have that completely separate own arrangements because of devolution. So we try and negotiate with local authorities to get higher fees. And historically, pre-COVID, they were able to, we had some leverage and could have some conversations. But right now, they don't have the budget.
Yeah.
And there's, a whole range of reasons as to why that is, and how, and resolving it is a challenge, not least for the fact. And I'm just going to take you right. We're down in the weeds, right? Let's take it right to the top level. There is the Department of Health and Social Care. That sets policy guidelines for both the NHS and social care. It is run by Wes Streeting. As I mentioned earlier, 50% of all of our funding as a care home comes from the local authorities. That is provided by the Department of Homes and Local Government, which is a completely separate body.
Yeah.
So the DHSC, Department of Health and Social Care, could say, here's a policy for social care, please enact it. And the local authorities will say, well, we've got to do this. DHCLG, can we have some more money, please? And they will say no.
No. Yeah.
Because it's a complete, and at the very top, and these guys, by the way, spend hours arguing about it between departments. That is the top level problem of the structural issues within social care. Cascade that all the way down to care homes, and that's the weeds that we've been talking about.
I do feel I do have lots of questions, B, lots of theoretical questions. So I do feel as though this might be something that maybe needs to run and run. I'm just conscious, we're just slightly over the hour mark now, but I've got so many questions just in terms of sort of the private care and then the care that the NHS provide, and how that marries up and how that matches up, and I do wonder whether or not it is actually another episode, because I have got a few questions.
Those are incredibly valuable questions, and how you access NHS funding, so further nursing, FNC, and CHC funding, continuing healthcare, critical conversations for anyone involved in care and who's looking after someone. So absolutely, let's have those questions and let's talk about it, because we as a society do not know enough about what goes on in social care and how you access this. I had the privilege today of going around a local care facility. They deal with acquired brain injury and spinal issues. Spent a wonderful hour with the owner, and just by walking around and talking to her, I learned stuff about what goes on in that part of the sector. So the more we can share and ask these questions, which no doubt everyone else has, it'd be great to do.
In a way, my wife is a GP, so I have a little bit of insight in terms of sort of NHS, and I'm in education. She's in the NHS, and so we speak a lot, and I see a lot of care from a care home education point of view. So I'm really curious in terms of the private care and the national health care, and the synergy or the integration or lack of, I suppose, in terms of how do we get over that? Because I completely understand that there's no real synergy, for want of a better phrase. So actually, what does that look like, nuts and bolts, day to day on the ground? So I'm absolutely fascinated by this, and in a way, going back to what Adam said, I was a little bit like, I wonder, social care, okay, but genuinely fascinating in terms of the insight that you've given us. So I definitely think we need to do this again, just to explore some of the things that we've just raised there about actually what are the implications of independent versus the NHS versus etc. So I really look forward to the next one.
Definitely. I mean, it's the tour boy radio way. We get towards the end of an episode and we're about halfway through.
Yeah, because I asked the question after 55 minutes. Michael went, "Well, that's a whole different podcast." I was like, "Well, yeah, it probably is, but
and it will be,
and it will be." But I think there are quite a few episodes where we get like really to the nub and really to the crux of it after about 50 minutes. Or why didn't we talk about that 50 minutes ago? But no, genuinely, Michael, I think we've only just scratched the surface on this in terms of the understanding and in terms of just making people aware of like the funding model and how it works and everything else. So I think there's another episode on the cards.
100%. And to be honest, guys, you mentioned it there, and you shouldn't feel guilty about having that, and I shouldn't feel guilty. I'm going to say that now because it's me, but about that reticence about having that conversation, because the reason why we've not had that conversation with our parents and all our loved ones and our children It's because we don't feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the hurdle that we need to overcome. So if it's the one thing that we take away from this episode, or you guys who were listening to it take away from this episode, is have that conversation now while you have the capacity to do so, because it will save you a lot of time and a lot of heartache in the future. That's the one thing that we want you to understand from this. And yes, we will revisit it at some point in the very, very near future. We'll get Michael back on. We'll pick his brains again. But before we let him go, we'll ask him just quickly. We'll give him 5-10 minutes to talk about another subject that he's passionate about. Futsal, then. So since you joined us pre-Christmas, what have we missed? What have we missed in the world of futsal?
You have missed England absolutely dominate Switzerland in an international futsal match.
Yeah, we love that.
5-1 win, hat-trick by Liam Palfreyman. Much more comprehensive than I think we thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
To be fair, Switzerland gave us a good game. You could have seen it us going in at 2-1 down at half-time, but we didn't. 2-1 up, and yeah, I think the highlights are still on YouTube. Definitely worth a watch. And then next Tuesday, we have the privilege of hosting Spain at Loughborough. Tickets are still available. Spain are obviously one of the top 3 countries in the world at futsal. Yeah. Incredibly tough group. I've got tickets. I'm dragging my son up. So if you see a car doing honestly officer at the speed limit, but probably a little bit more than that, up the A34, it's me getting to Loughborough. Yeah, that's going to be a great game. So yeah, futsal continues to grow apace. My local futsal club, Wessex, flying high in the league. Unfortunately, lost 5-1 this weekend to Bloomsbury. So yeah, futsal is growing, and I think I'm hoping this international match against Spain is a great event. It deserves to be, and yeah, we are up against it, but it's going to be a good match to watch.
Yeah, fantastic. So some of the feedback that we had after this, so we shared a video on social media. You said to go and search out some of the best futsal goals on the last episode, which we did. And for our listeners, we shared that out on social media, on Twitter, Blue Sky, and where have you. And a lot of the feedback we got from people was how much they enjoyed it. Whether they're still with us, we hope so. Maybe this episode will jog them on to go and do so and have another look, and maybe take a trip to Loughborough in the very, very near future. But yeah, I must admit, from not knowing one thing about futsal to going and watching the goals, it's a fantastic, very fast-paced and entertaining sport to watch.
No, futsal's amazing. And we spoke about last time, just in terms of the growth of the technical aspect and the technical ability of futsal is, and if you enjoy football and you enjoy the technically gifted players, go and watch futsal, because it is incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and this is my final year as a league secretary of a local league. We run futsal over the winter, so December, January, and February. We don't play outside; it's too wet. Let's go inside and play futsal. So we're at the end of the second month of that, and we do under 7s to under 10s. The development in the kids, just by playing 2 months, has been phenomenal. They're all enjoying it. They're all warm. The spectators are warm. That's important. And the technical ability is just through the roof. So it's a great game for a variety of reasons, and particularly good for youth football.
Brilliant.
And fingers crossed, next time we speak, England will have smashed Spain at futsal. Fingers crossed.
Indeed. And maybe Wales will do okay as well. I don't know.
Forget Wales. Not about that.
So that brings us, I think, nicely towards the end of this episode. As is so often the case, we will be doing another episode talking about social care. Gaz has got a number of questions which you won't ultimately forget in the meantime, but we'll hopefully re-jog his memory before we record. So Michael, thank you very much for joining us again. We've really enjoyed hearing from you again. Some of that stuff, I'm not going to say it's difficult to listen to, but it's going to be difficult to put into practice. It's very easy for us to sit here and say how important that it is to have those conversations now while all the faculties are in place for the most part, and I'm referring to myself rather than my parents. It is going to be difficult to say that we're going to do it, but actually doing it is going to be that little bit harder. it's going to be that little bit harder. But I know it's a conversation that we need to have. Like I say, I've got a younger brother who has worked in that industry, and to be fair, if I'm going to be really honest, I probably rely on him a little bit more so than I should, because he's got that level of familiarity, and I probably take a little bit for granted. Well, I don't take it for granted because I'm really impressed. Same as yourself, Michael, for the stuff that you've done. As someone who's incredibly squeamish, the idea of wiping someone else's arse is deeply unpleasant. Literally, my kids are 5 and 8. I still get a little bit of gag reflex in the back of my throat when I think about the nappies that I had to change, and I struggle. Literally, I ended up retching every single time I did it. Not very comfortable. My mum, when we do have conversations about this kind of thing, pretty much laughs at me. It's I know I can't rely on you, which she's 100% correct. She can't, but you know what I mean. It is that level, and I'm very, very, very fortunate. So, Mark, if you're listening, I'm very appreciative of all the stuff that you do. Not that he wipes my mum's arse, just to make that clear. We've gone down a route I didn't want to, but yeah, not. I was trying to wind it up. I'm not. So, yeah, thank you very much for joining us. We will get you back on. Is there one final thought you want to leave us with? Be it futsal, be it social care, we don't mind either way.
So I was struck by the fact that the junior word of the year was kindness, and I think that is something that I think we all try to embody in social care. We all do try to be kind to each other. For anyone out there who is thinking, "Oh, is there a space in the world for me where I can actually do good, have a career, exist in this kind environment that is supportive and generative, and sort of working towards that," please do consider social care. I know that there are a lot of people whose jobs are at risk at the moment. It's brutal what is going out there in hospitality and retail, and my heart does go out to you if you're in that position. Social care is recruiting. Please do, and we have many more roles than just care. We have cooks, we have cleaners, we have maintenance teams, we have finance, we have data analysts now, we have quality governance. There are huge careers there for you. Please do explore it.
Wow. Yeah, good advice, and a very interesting thought. I used to work in retail, 20 plus years in retail, and still in contact with a lot of people who used to work for me. And a number of them have got into social care because of the challenges, like you say, that retail faces, and are enjoying it greatly and finding it far more rewarding than working for me, as difficult as that is to believe. Gaz, do you want to sum it up, pal?
Yeah, just, talking about having those difficult conversations is much easier than having those difficult conversations. So, I know we've just said it, but go out and have those difficult conversations. And if you can't have those difficult conversations, just think about Adam's brother wiping Adam's arse. And on that note, I shall leave you. And next week, no doubt, we'll be talking about something completely different.
Oh, we might be talking about that.